The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
And welcome back to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jason Bryant. This show we talk news, reviews, previews, and interviews with topical things and notable news in the sport of wrestling. Today, our guest, Kevin Black, the head wrestling coach at River Falls High School in River Falls, Wisconsin. So if you're a geography buff, or even if you're not, go about 30 minutes due east of the Twin Cities, and you will find River Falls, Wisconsin, an NCAA All-American at the University of Wisconsin. Kevin, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So folks may have heard this voice before. Kevin's been on a previous episode of the World Wrestling Resource in which we talked a lot about women's wrestling and development. And that's really where we're talking to Kevin today, as he wrote a blog about a week and a half ago, about something unique River Falls High School is going to be doing with women's wrestling. The school itself is unique in terms of the position that you even hold within the school system. So rather than beat around the bush, Kevin, what is it that you and River Falls High School are doing to further promote women's wrestling?
Well, we had, I'd say it was about a 10-month process that we worked with our school administrators, with our superintendent, our school lawyer, and put together an opportunity for, right now, 6 high school girls to move into our district and be a part of a traditional high school, but also be able to train alongside some of the best high school girls wrestlers in the country. And I had some pretty cool opportunities over the last couple of years to get involved with some top high school girls, and we were able to bring them in here, and we just kind of started training after Cadet Worlds, and have been on what we'd say like a 12-month plan to get them prepared for the World Championships next year if everything goes well. And part of that is going to high school, and now they're on the high school boys wrestling team. They're not going to compete against any of the boys throughout the season. There's eligibility rules and things like that we're not going to go through those hurdles, but they're in the room, they're practicing, and they're wrestling with some of the best girls in the country.
So before we get this, earlier in the summer, we had Wyoming Seminary announce that they were going to start a women's program, and that being pretty much a boarding school out in Pennsylvania, brought Erin Vandiver and Adeline Gray out. So what? This is not a response to that, but it gives another option as opposed to what has also been going on at Northern Michigan, where some athletes in the past would go to up to Northern and be at Marquette High School for their senior year while basically living on campus in college. So how is this similar and how is this different?
Well, I think that this was started more in a grassroots sort of fashion. We had started this project last fall before anything was announced with Wyoming Seminary, and we had been talking to some female athletes. And then earlier this year, when we heard that Wyoming Seminary was going to also do something, it sort of took a little bit of wind out of my sails, to be quite honest. But we had focused on a couple girls in the Midwest that we wanted to try to get to the top, and we knew that they needed to be practicing with some high school girls. So when the Wyoming Seminary thing came out as an option, a couple of our girls were realistic and legitimate choices for Wyoming Seminary to try to get a hold of and bring out there. And we didn't know for sure if we were going to continue to follow through with this plan that we had already put so much legwork into, and it was the right fit for those girls that were here to continue on this path. And they were girls that I had worked with previously, so we had an athlete-coach relationship already established, and we were already moving forward and doing some things, so it just worked for them to stay here.
You're an All-American at the University of Wisconsin, 3-time qualifier. Your brother Tony also All-American at Wisconsin. And when does the gears shift in your coaching mind to start focusing or spending a lot more time coaching women's wrestlers, especially at the developmental age groups?
It's a good question. I don't know really if I have a clear answer, but I think that how it's worked for me is I've just had athletes that have showed up on my doorstep, kind of figuratively, but also literally. And those are the ones that I work with, whether if they're male or female. And when I had a what we call super club kind of here in the Midwest. I had a big wrestling club. We had a lot of guys that were doing some really great things, and then we also had some girls who were doing some incredible things too. And I don't know if I looked at seeking out opportunities as gender specific, but when we had some female athletes who were doing some pretty high level things, I followed them along, and we were able to do some things at the international level. And so I guess it sort of worked its way out that it found me. I didn't go seeking to try to create a girls' opportunity. These girls kind of just came about in a natural way, and then we knew we needed to take it to a new level. So if it was a male athlete, I think that there's been examples of guys like Kyle Snyder and Henry Cejudo and people who made transitions in their high school careers, and there were people that were part of that. And I guess I don't think this is any different. It just so happens that they're females rather than males. So then I end up being in more female wrestling circles than I do in male wrestling circles sometimes.
And you've had that opportunity. You've been on coaching staffs at the senior level and most recently at the Cadet World Championships in Athens. And it seems that people, when they come to you, it's not just the wrestling technique, too. You also tend to be somewhat of a life coach. I think it was 2009. We had talked, and I did an interview for Win Magazine about now Deanna Betterman, but Deanna Ricks had been in a probably not a troublesome spot, but needed some life changes, and you helped mold her along. And the same thing a little bit with Helen Maroulis. And how much do you think that reputation's kind of said, okay, Kevin Black is a guy that can work with any level of athlete and help them on the mat and off the mat?
I think that it's a very important part of how I do what I do and why I do what I do. I think that my aim in coaching wrestling is that wrestling is really only just a metaphor for life, and we're trying to help young athletes or even sometimes senior level athletes understand who they are. We talk about the total athlete being the body, mind, and soul. So there's the physical training. We also have the mental skills training, which I think we do differently than a lot of other programs. But then also that third dimension, kind of the spirit or the soul, where we find our purpose and where we talk about value and purpose and significance, which are things that every single human being wrestles with. And I come from a background that is from a Christian biblical perspective that is part of my coaching style. It's not a prerequisite for my athletes by any means, but that's who I am and that's how I coach. So a lot of the people that do end up coming to us might have some of those things in place as well and are interested in developing that part of their being. And we make it as critical as the singles and doubles, that we're developing the whole person. And like what we say here is that we want to make sure that our athletes are wholehearted, that they are they're satisfied with who they are and comfortable in their skin. And then wrestling is just a byproduct of who they are. It's what they do. It's not who they are.
Yeah, and also to be clear too, there is that faith-based component to your coaching, and then your private club back in the day. But it's not something that you're forcing on anybody. So if somebody happens to be an atheist, they could still be welcome, because those values don't necessarily they're not just based on religion.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, for me personally, in my life and my purpose, can't be separated. But as far as coaching wrestling and my role as a wrestling coach, yeah, absolutely. They're here to wrestle, and part of us finding out that we have a bigger purpose in life than just winning wrestling matches. It's a pretty shallow pursuit to do things for individual glory and individual success, because people are going to forget who you are in a matter of 10, 15, 20, 100 years. It's hard to leave that big of an impact. I mean, we have multiple time Olympic gold medalists in U.S. history, like George Menhart, and nobody's ever mentioned him in the comments of, oh, the greatest of all time. It's the people who are here and who are now. We forget other people, right? So if we're doing all of this just for our name and our glory, I think it's a little bit less of a motivating factor when we can have something bigger than ourselves. So, and we just call it like a transcendent cause, having something that is bigger in you that you're doing all of this for, and it's tied into your purpose and why you do what you do.
When you look at the way women's wrestling is being shaped, how much do you think now? You talked a little bit about the start of the program there at River Falls, and then of course maybe the similarities between Wyoming Seminary. But when you look at it now, and saying, okay, we've got two places. We've got a private school scenario, which is a high academic institution in terms of its reputation, whereas people that go there go to the Ivy League, and you have a public school situation at River Falls. So you've got options for both sides of the country and both different types of scholastic systems, where if somebody's from the West Coast and they're used to a private school, they've got an option, or if somebody's from the Midwest or East Coast that's used to a public school, they have those options.
Yeah, I think that both of them too are well, I guess I can speak for ours for sure. Is my coaching style, my philosophy of sport and life is not for everyone. And so, yeah, we're a public school institution, and anybody in our public school system can participate in wrestling, and they're free to do that, and we're welcoming to all of them. But as far as making like a change and making a move to a new district, I think that it has to be a good fit, at least here for River Falls. And we've had some other athletes who've shown some interest here and there, and there's just a lot of factors that have to be right for this project that we're doing. And so I can't speak for sure on Wyoming Seminary, but it's not for everyone. So I think that this is a pretty exclusive group. It's a small group, and that's kind of how we set out to do it, and we want to be intentional about how we continue to do things.
Since you kind of announced this on your blog, basically, and it's circulated some on Facebook, but have you gotten any calls from other people that may be interested in kind of maybe copying your model and say, yeah, we would like to do this, say, in Texas, or like to do this in California or Florida, or places where women's wrestling has athletes, but they're just still looking for that next push?
Yeah, no, not yet. And I don't know if I will. I don't know how big the women's wrestling circle is in that regard. I think that our model that we did can be replicated anywhere.
I got a hunch you're going to get calls. I just got a hunch.
Yeah. And I'm open to helping people, take those steps to figure out how to create some opportunities for people. There are other sort of outside the box ways to get people together too. Like Jeff Estrada is doing some outside the box kinds of things, and even guys who are college coaches are doing some outside the box things with high school athletes, and trying to make sure that they can get the training opportunities that they need to succeed. But for us, it was really just talk to a couple administrators, and our administration was really supportive, and they're all in for this, and get some families to support it, and it worked. It was just, let's just do it. Let's just stop waiting for it to happen, and let's do it, and let's create the opportunity. So that's what we did, and I think anybody can really do it.
Competition-wise, what is the schedule going to look like? You said they're going to be practicing with your team, but not competing in the boys' scholastic season. Where are you going to see competition for these athletes?
We'll probably, we'll mostly follow the USA Wrestling schedule, which they did last year as well as high school wrestlers from all over the U.S. Some of them wrestled on high school varsity teams. Some of them didn't. But the meat and potatoes of our schedule is in the spring and summer. We have one athlete who's at the senior level now, but age-wise will be in 2018, so we'll be able to get some senior level competition in. And but they're really just gearing up for some of those big age level competitions like Body Bar and and then hopefully Pan Am's and World Championships. But when we look at other countries, we compete far more than other countries who are having success at the international level. And sometimes for us with our system, it's the person who can make it through to the end, right? We go through a grueling college season, both boys and men and women. And then it's the person whose body's held up that can make the team, right? And that's the person that represents us. That we've got some younger people on the team now, which I think makes a big difference. But our system sort of leads to the person who who can make it through that long 10-year grind of high school and college and those first couple of years as a grad assistant coach are the ones that are on our world teams. And internationally, especially with the way the rules have been recently, those other countries are not competing. They're not wrestling 100 matches in a year. And along with all of those matches comes making weight. And so, we're not as focused then on strength training and technique development. It's about weight management. And I think, my experience and a lot of other people's experience in wrestling, a lot of it circled around weight management throughout an entire 10 months, 12 months. So we're able to get to focusing on developing, this 14 to 17-year-old age group. I think is really important for female wrestlers especially, but also for some of our elite male wrestlers. And we're focusing on that developing these athletes to be the best in the world, rather than just trying to get a conference championship, a state title, or whatever, which those things are awesome. But, our crew has goals beyond that.
When you look at the success of women's wrestling globally, you have to look at Japan right off the bat. They've got the most medals, they've got the most champs, they've in every age group. Having been on the staff at the senior, junior, and cadet levels, let's look at your experience in Athens this summer and be like, okay, well, what do the Japanese do? What do these countries that are having success at this age group do? You'd mentioned they compete less, but what are some other things that they do well that the United States and our system is going to have to mimic or perhaps innovate beyond to see that level of success?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's the question of the day in the women's wrestling world. Japan has dominated since women's wrestling started. So it's not like this just happened recently. So countries have been trying to figure it out for a long time. I think what will end up having to happen for the U.S. To make it work, the United States land-wise is so big, so we have a hard time pooling our resources and getting people together to train together. So it's hard for the best girl in California to train with the best girl in Wisconsin. And Terry and Emma have tried to do some of those things with different development camps, but in the United States, I don't know all of the other countries and what their system is, but in the United States, if you're a teenager, you got to go to high school, and it's hard. You can only miss a certain number of days, and to have to leave school to train is it's not really a possibility. So there's those talks, but what I see is the biggest difference between the American development system and some of our teenagers in Japan is those girls in Japan are so disciplined and focused and driven. And I think that there's a lot of things for teenagers that are important being a teenager in the United States. But to me, it seems like when we get to the World Championships, the Japanese athletes are so disciplined and even like respectful of their coaching staff. And, there's no goofing around. We play games before practice. I like playing games. Good warm up, good dynamic movements. The Japanese are all business, and so I don't know that I've ever seen them throwing a ball around at a World Championships where, sometimes we'll be doing that. So I think that's a difference. And culturally, kids are just raised differently. So I think what we have to do is similar to how men's freestyle has shown some success recently, and is we have to figure out what's best for the Americans and how we can create our own, because we can't copy Japan. Japan's already doing what Japan is. We can't be another Japan. It just isn't feasible with how our country is structured. So, but I think that getting girls together, getting our 14 to 17-year-olds to be training rather than practicing. Training is different than just showing up to practice. I think that that's a big step, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. And the Japanese are also ready to win senior world medals when they're 18 years old. And I don't know if we've had many 18-year-olds from the United States in recent years that are female that are ready to win world medals. So that's another reason why I think our 14 to 17-year-old development is so important.
Yeah, and we also look at, Japan. You had mentioned the 17, 18-year-olds coming off. Like Eri Tosaka swept the quad. I mean, she went 13, 14, 15 world title, then 16 Olympic gold. So, and then there's where there's one, there's more behind her. Moving towards the system you talked about, when it's sometimes the last man standing or last woman standing with the system's the way it is. Women's wrestling in college is with the WCWA is freestyle. It's a season that starts late September, early October, and it ends in February, and then it gets into the season, the international season. How much do you feel that giving women at the developmental level and then getting them that freestyle option into college versus like we have to switch on the men's side from folk style to freestyle, how much has the freestyle college situation really helped the development of this country and that you've been able to see from the mindset of the 14, 15, 16-year-old girl?
That's a good question. I would say logically it makes sense that it would help us, right? I think that if our girls are training and competing in freestyle all year, they would be ready to compete on that international level. I'm also interested in the statistics of things. What are our highest percentage attacks, but also what is actually working statistically. And so, without like stirring up the pot here, I think that there is a college option, which is fantastic for a large percentage of girls. And from that college option, there are going to be some girls that do come through. They make age level world teams, right? They're on the junior world teams. They're on our U23s. And Helen and Vicky and, most recently Allie Reagan, they've competed at the collegiate level, for 4 seasons, but they had a little bit different type of collegiate experience where they spent some time at the Olympic Training Center. And so it's a pretty complex thing, I think, if it's going to translate to senior level world medals. I think that the college experience is wonderful for 95, 99% of the female wrestlers out there. However, I think that the ones that were looking to win world medals at 18, 19, 20 years old might need a little bit different path. So I don't know for sure, because the jury's still out, because there's not a whole lot of evidence support one way or the other. There's not, there hasn't been a ton of years to show that one leads to success over the other. So it's a tough question. It's complex, and I think that in the end, it's going to be an individual who's going to pursue a gold medal. And like somebody like Helen, I was fortunate to be in her corner for a little bit of her career, but man, the last couple of years, my 9-year-old son could have sat in her corner and she would have won gold medals because she was so focused and so disciplined that she did everything right, over the last couple of years from a training standpoint. So yeah, I don't know if that's a good answer to the question, but it's complex, and I think that a lot of it depends on who the individual is too.
Well, I think we're looking at world and Olympians and athletes who want to do that. You're looking at a select small percentage of the elite already. So the small sample sizes that are going to be in that realm. But at least maybe with the women's college wrestling scene, it gives you a bigger pool of athletes to draw from that 1%, which kind of leads into my next question about, what are your thoughts on what Sally Roberts and the crew have been doing with Wrestle Like a Girl and then petitioning the NCAA to work on emerging sports status? I mean, how do you see this, let's taking a step back from the elite and growing women's wrestling as a whole within this country?
Well, I think it's a huge, huge need in our country. And we just had Sally to River Falls for a Wrestle Like a Girl camp a couple of weeks ago. We had over 100 athletes at our camp, and she does a really awesome job. And there's a lot of things in the works that that we don't see, on social media or that, you sit down and have a conversation with Sally, and some of the things she's doing behind the scenes to advance women's wrestling, it's unbelievable. I'm all for the advancement of women's wrestling, but I have not even thought of half of the things that Sally's involved in. So it's a pretty cool thing. But I think that their mission of getting high school state sanctioned wrestling would change a lot of that thing that we talked about earlier with that 14 to 17-year-old development. Right now, a lot of girls show up in high school wrestling rooms, and they're the only girl. They have to act like a boy. They are, most of the time coached like a boy, or maybe not even coached at all. There's a couple that get the attention of a coach or rise through, but sometimes we never know what a 14-year-old kid is going to do. If I got a freshman who signs up for my wrestling team, he's a male, I'm going to give him an opportunity, and he might not have gone through puberty yet. By the time he's 18, he might be a man and might be incredible, right? But if he just gets squashed down when he's 14 years old as a ninth grader, we might never see him when he's developed. And I think that happens far more than not with girls who have to enter a boys wrestling room. It's not preferred for anybody. The girl doesn't want that. The coaches don't want it. The team doesn't want it. They'll be supportive. They probably know the person as an individual, their classmates, but it's a tough deal. And when there's one girl in there, it's hard for them to get the development that they need. And sometimes, it might require a little more patience or a little bit more attention. And I have 44 boys on my high school team. Sometimes it's hard to pay all that attention to one person who physically and mentally is at the bottom of the totem pole, right? And I think that sometimes that's what the girls start at, and they never get a chance to rise to the top. So a room full of high school girls with a coach for all of those girls, I think, would give all of those girls an opportunity to grow and develop. And right now, I think it's really difficult for those girls, and some of them do make it through, and that's awesome. And then they have that adversity and that fighter in them that leads to some success. But it would be better for the United States if we didn't just have to rely on the girls that made it through that really difficult high school wrestling experience. We had some girls that showed up here at our school this year, and I had over 20 girls come up to me and say, "Hey, girls can wrestle?" I'm like, "Yeah, they can wrestle." And you and I know that because we're in wrestling. We see girls wrestling, but it's not offered as a high school sport, and we're missing out on a whole bunch of athletes who are just willing to give it a shot because it's an organized activity. If it's not an organized activity, they're not going to give it a shot. And why should they, right? They'll play basketball. They'll play girls hockey when you're up in this area because it's organized. There's a team. And so I think if we had high school girls wrestling, the numbers would explode, as it's shown in the states that do have state-sanctioned wrestling. But I know in Wisconsin it would explode, and that just creates a bigger talent pool.
Your relationship, your dad is a leader in Wisconsin, and your brother Tony working at USA Wrestling. How much have you kind of gleaned on their knowledge on, maybe what can the Wisconsin Wrestling Federation do to lobby the WIAA to get girls high school wrestling pushing, and what can the national office do for these things? Have you had those conversations?
We have a little group right now in Wisconsin that has tried to put some things together to try to pitch a proposal. It's been tricky. It's been hard with some of the bureaucratic stuff, the behind the scenes stuff. But this year in Wisconsin, we're just we're just trying to make it happen instead of waiting for it to happen. So within our system right now, the WIAA system, we're gonna there's a couple tournaments. We call them Christmas tournaments. They're over the holiday break. They're big, 30 to 50 team tournaments. And then there's a couple others throughout the year that are just going to offer a girls division. It's within our state sanction, which is WIAA. It's in the WIAA rules to have a mat that's just girls wrestling. The last couple of years we had this little thing we called the Wisconsin Challenge series, and girls could just show up and wrestle at that. They, attach for their team. They have to do the skin fold stuff and the hydration, everything just like everyone else who would wrestle in a state sanctioned event. And I guess we're just trying to create some opportunities with what we have. But there are things also in the background that are, knocking on the door and having conversations with the WIAA and trying to figure out how we can make this happen. And I think states like Washington, they just got a mat at the state tournament that showcased girls, and it worked, and it was awesome. And now they have, a couple thousand girls wrestling in high school.
The women's wrestling has been in the papers the last couple of weeks, mainly because of the club wrestler up in Michigan that wants to compete with the guys, and the NCWA has been attacked by the ACLU in regards of discrimination. And this circles back to the point about girls wrestling girls creates more interest from girls. How what is your thoughts on maybe that whole I don't know how much you've read into it, but thoughts on that whole ACLU NCWA thing?
Yeah, I haven't read into it at all. But you're right. Girls wrestling girls creates a lot more interest than girls wrestling boys. And I think when kids are little, before any sort of development takes place, before the teenage years, the girls wrestling the boys is kind of like novel. And I think that a lot of moms and dads are excited about the girl who can beat a boy, and even a team or a female athlete is excited about beating a boy. But if that's our goal, we're never going to grow if it's about girls beating boys. It's got to be bigger than that. And sometimes, girls just wrestling girls, yeah, they're 9 years old. They don't get that same push or that grind that they get from wrestling the boys because the talent pool is so much smaller. But now we're 15 years old or 17 years old, and when they have to wrestle girls because physically everything has changed, and that 155-pound girl physically should not be competing against a 155-pound boy who's been shaving for 4 years. There comes a place now where this girl doesn't have an opportunity to compete against girls because they all left the sport because they only had to wrestle boys, because we thought, 5 years before that, 10 years before that, oh yeah, they got to beat the boys. If they beat the boys, that's our measuring stick. They're as good as the boys, and that's a measuring stick. But if girls had opportunities just to wrestle girls, the numbers would skyrocket. And it's hard because, it's like a build it and they will come sort of thing, where a lot of opportunities are not going to be offered until the numbers are higher. And so that's also a struggle. But I really do believe if a state were to sanction, the girls would show up. If they're waiting for the girls to show up for the sanction, they're not going to show up. And so when girls wrestle girls, the interest levels are way higher, and they should be. It makes sense to the girls and to the boys. So
now I'm going to shift gears to a little bit about what you've been doing. This is your 5th year as the head coach at River Falls High School. You had the Victory School of Wrestling before that. What have you learned about yourself as a coach getting back into high school coaching at your alma mater, no less, from the private coaching type of realm? I mean, there's always that balance between, do people need to go to clubs to get the extra training? There's maybe the coach at the less established high school that's worried about losing their kids to more established programs that have clubs. I mean, what have you seen from your experiences with your club and your coaching on both sides of it that you see the benefits and maybe things that have been able to be corrected or concerns that can be quelled over the years?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed in high school wrestling, going from the club scene and being able to travel around with some at some international or senior level competitions, at the high school level, culture really, really matters. And I think that your culture can be the driver for success or for how far you can go as a team. And when we talk about success, I'm not just talking about the wins and losses, but that idea of that wholehearted person who feels good about their involvement in wrestling, and they have big goals, and they're good citizens, and they have good character, and the culture matters. And so that in my short experience here, 5 years as a head coach, has probably been the most challenging thing, because when I was running a club, the cream of the crop would come to our club, and they were already driven. They were already expecting big things of themselves, where, in a high school setting, public school, you take whoever signs up, and we try to have some really clear standards so that everybody knows when they show up on the first day of practice, these are the expectations. And we, of course, we follow through. those expectations, but it's not a room full of state champions, and so having to have a different perspective has been a big area of growth for me, and actually having that change of perspective in saying, okay, this is about developing, high school sports is about developing an athlete, having the healthy culture where they can learn and grow and things like that. Hopefully we can coach them and we can become better wrestlers and we can do some good things. But I feel like sometimes it's like I have to accept a consolation prize, which I don't like doing. I'm like, well, okay, it's high school wrestling. It's not always about the wins and losses. Where I grew up, and for me as a high school wrestling, it was about the wins and losses. And so developing a culture where, they know they're accepted, but God darn it, go out and try to win. And that's where I feel like has been the biggest change for me as a coach coaching high school kids. And hopefully we're moving forward and changing, but there's a lot of factors that I didn't have to deal with when we were doing a club, such as grades and the way that kids are treating teachers and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's fun. It's a really joyful and life-giving sort of opportunity, and also hard.
Another thing about your program, I wanted to bring this up because it's the first opportunity I've had publicly to explain it, is you guys lost a great supporter, backer, booster, photographer, Justin Bystrom, at the end of last season. And what did he mean to the school and the program and just the wrestling community there in River Falls?
It's hard to put a finger on. I mean, Justin was one of my best friends, and I was honored to speak at his funeral and try to honor and remember him well. And he did a lot of little things behind the scenes. He was our club president. He was also he was a big guy, so he was sort of the face of our program because he was pretty recognizable. But he did so many things about making people feel comfortable and feel welcome that we'll never be able to replace. Hopefully I think the day that he died, every one of us became better people because we knew what we were going to miss with him, and we had to try to fill the void. And making other people feel welcomed was something that he did. And I think about him often in that he always said hello to whoever, whether if it was me, his kids, with a handshake. And it went unnoticed, I think, but now I find myself like, oh man, like, let me just address this person with a handshake, look him in the eyes, and things like that, where he just made people feel welcomed. And he was kind and kind-hearted, and that's what everyone said. So yeah, he did a lot of really cool things, and he did some stuff for our state too. He was our website director for our state association, and he did a lot of photography. He was down on the mat side at the U.S. Open and the Olympic trials, and captured a lot of really cool things. But he was really kind-hearted, but was also able to catch that sensitive side of sport. And I think it enriched all of our lives, and we're all better for it. And I think now his kind of legacy moving forward is that we're all trying to make people feel welcomed, I guess, in our club, in our program. We're still picking up the pieces. We don't have a website right now because all of that was in his name and the passwords and everything, and we're trying hard to get that switched over. So some of that stuff is still lingering on. But yeah, he was a great guy. He was really awesome for the sport of wrestling here in Northwest Wisconsin, and we miss him a lot.
Yeah, I remember Shane Sparks and I were rooming together at the World Team Trials, and that's when he had told me, and I hadn't even known. And I was just thinking about talking to him in Madison to World Team Trials or in Fargo. I go back and look through my pictures, like, oh, there's one of my favorite photos of me, and the vainness that I have that I use for like a Facebook profile. It's got his watermark on it. So at least you talked about his legacy. I know that a lot of us in the wrestling media that have been friends with him for a number of years, one, we get invited to the pulled pork fundraiser that I could never make it out to, and we've got pictures that he took that are up on Facebook. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a chance to talk about him a little bit. And
something that one other thing that um, that Justin would say to every senior who would go through River Falls. And he was around for a long time. He graduated high school from River Falls in '89, so he'd been around and stayed in the area. So, but he'd always go up to the kid after their last match, a little handshake, and it was his thing. And he always would say to him, "Was it all worth it?" And it kind of became, since he's passed, it's like, man, it was so profound in that these guys who busted their butt for high school wrestling, some of them continued on through college, but he understood that, man, this was cool. This was good stuff. So he'd ask those teenagers, like, was it all worth it? They'd come off the mat after their last match, and there he was, shake the hand, little hug, was it all worth it? And that's been something that we've kind of thought deeper on now here as a program too. And what we're doing, is it worth it? Are we impacting people? Are we changing lives? Are we making the world a better place? And I think that's all helped us with perspective.
Now to bring up happier thoughts, I guess, although thoughts of Justin are usually happy, but we got a fun part of the program now. Short time on, short time, 10 questions. I'm going to throw the timer out because 90 seconds never seems to last, but are you ready for it?
Okay, yeah.
All right. Question 1, your favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Oh my gosh, I don't understand Twitter. Let me think. I don't know. I follow some education websites. I follow USA Wrestling. Yeah, let's just go with USA Wrestling.
Question 2, you win the Olympic gold medal. What are you having for dinner?
Well, when Helen won an Olympic gold medal this last year, I'll never win an Olympic gold medal. But I was there when Helen did, and then we went to a Brazilian steakhouse.
Who's the best wrestler people don't talk about?
Of all time, or
just in your opinion? Like, who's one person that never gets their due? You'd mentioned like Maynard earlier, as people don't mention him in terms of all-time greats. But who's somebody that you regard as an all-time great that doesn't get the credit?
Ooh. How about Ben Peterson?
Question 4, all-time favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Oh, iced tea.
Iced tea Gatorade,
remember iced tea?
That must,
yeah, you remember?
I don't know, man. I never saw
90,
that one.
93.
Yeah. I like the lemon
ice. I think
ice.
about it often.
Question 5, your favorite video game of all time?
Oh, I was never a video game guy. Madden 98.
That's what, right before you right before you went to college, right? Sounds about right, or right? That freshman year. Question 6, your favorite international wrestler outside of, say, Helen, or anybody you coach. How about that?
Who's the favorite athlete that I coach?
Who's your favorite international wrestler that's not an athlete you coach?
Oh man, I hope Helen's not listening. I really enjoyed always watching Sophia Madsen. She just had a baby, but I liked her style because she wrestled like a high school male wrestler, scrambling crazy. I'm glad Helen beat her butt down when it counted, but I liked watching her.
Yeah, I always said she was the most folk stylish collegiate style wrestler of any international wrestler you would see. It was definitely her. Question 7. You're quite a connoisseur of the food. What's the best recipe you make from scratch?
I make a number of different soups right now. The good old classic chicken noodle soup.
What's the key to that?
My kids eat it. Love.
All right. Well, my chicken and veggies is loaded with vegetables. I'm not sure how much love's in it. It's a lot because I sliced my hand on a mandolin the other day. Anyway, question 8: if you could wrestle anybody from history, whether it be a wrestler, a historical figure, anybody from history, who would it be?
Mava Petirov.
Good answer. Question 9: what's your favorite and funniest Tony Black story? Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Several. I shared one at his wedding that is, this one pops into my head. Okay, so there's some background here. This isn't a short answer. I got 90 seconds.
No, time. I'm not even timing these things anymore. Just go.
Okay. So we used to have the Kansas City Chiefs that trained in River Falls in the summer for a few weeks. They wanted to get out of the heat. It wasn't as humid, so they would scrimmage some teams that also trained in Wisconsin. The Saints, the Bears, the Packers, and then the Vikings, which were right next door. And the Vikings came over one year, and there was a player for the Vikings. This was in the mid-'90s. His name was Keith Millard. He was Defensive Player of the Year. He had 19.5 sacks, defensive tackle. And he got injured the next year after, so then he's coming back, and there were these two hulking giants that were on the defensive line. Keith Millard, who was like 6'5", 300 pounds, and Chris Dolman, who was like 6'6", 300 pounds. And they both were ridiculous. Well, Keith Millard had missed curfew a couple nights before because he ran his car into a median outside of a Hardee's in Mankato, Minnesota. And so he had to walk back, and he missed curfew. He got fined. It was on the news. It was like, oh, Keith Millard, his car, he got in an accident. They didn't know for sure if there was any, foul play involved. It ended up not. I mean, he was a good guy. But he was coming through the signing of all of the fans, or probably a couple thousand fans, lining this little walkway, and the players were coming through signing autographs. And Keith Millard was with Chris Dolman, and my brother got up on the shoulders of one of our family friends, and he waved his hands. He's like, Mr. Millard, Mr. Millard, Mr. Millard. And he thought he was just a fan, right? We're Packer fans, by the way, which is an important part of the story. They're the Vikings. So Keith Millard came over like he was going to sign an autograph, and he leaned over, got close to me, and said, hey, can I have a ride home? And then and Tony was like 10 years old, and it was just awesome beatdown. And the Vikings, we didn't like them, and he's like, oh my gosh, the kids are making fun of me now and everything. So that's one of my best stories of him.
Oh, that's hilarious, because I knew you guys are Packer fans. So I'm wondering where this Viking stuff is going, because because question 10 was easy. It's a two-parter. It's going to be, you're in River Falls, which is 30 minutes from the Twin Cities. Or Vikings or Packers. It's an easy answer, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But here's the next question, the second part of that question. Twins or Brewers?
We're actually Twins fans. We don't mind the Brewers. It just was that we had watched the Twins forever growing up. And in 1987, when the Twins won the World Series, we went to a Twins-Brewers game, and we wanted the cool Kirby Puckett and Gary Gaetti cups that they had with the soft drinks. And the guy next to us had 3 of them, and Tony said, hey, can I have your cups? And he said, well, you got to start cheering for the Twins. And we did. We cheered for the Twins. He gave us the cups, and the Twins won the World Series that year. So we've just been Twins fans ever since.
Yeah, I always like hearing those stories about random people, about how you become fan. I mean, granted, you're 30 minutes away. It's not like it's a reach. I mean, I'm from Virginia, and I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan. Try to riddle me that one, or I'm an Angels fan. Yeah, that's we won't even go there. But all right, Kevin, again, just to recap, if anybody's interested in being a part of this River Falls, women's experiment program, innovation, so to speak, in the future, how can they get a hold of you? How can they maybe help contribute to the cause? I mean, what's the way to go about getting a hold of you for something like this?
I'm available. Email, Kevin@riverfallswrestling.org, Facebook, Twitter, which I don't get, but yeah, I don't understand. I get the messages, but I don't understand. So anyway, I feel like I'm a pretty good communicator. So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm all game.
Yeah, just not on the Twitter or the Snapchats. It's just the traditional email and Facebook.
Yeah, right.
You are listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast with my daddy, Jason Bryant.
And big thanks to Kevin Black, who just all-around great guy. I got to know Kevin really for our first trip to the World Championships in 2009 in Denmark. Pretty sure that was his 30th birthday. I think he's just a skosh younger than I am, because if I'm not mistaken, my 30, yeah, he's a little bit younger than I am. But anyway, Kevin's been a good friend and just a good person in the sport of wrestling. And, of course, his family, Dave, as his dad we've been mentioning, and Tony, my coworker at USA Wrestling for 3 years. Just good people that have been a great part to add to people that you can call friends. So glad to see that Kevin's doing great. I could have just driven out there and done that. That would have been a better way than to do it. But maybe next time I've mentioned that barbecue fundraiser they do. Maybe I'll actually drive out there for that. Other things, speaking of fundraisers, Yeah, you like that segue. Matt Talk Online, this network, the Matt Talk Podcast Network, with I don't know, we're well over 1,000 episodes published, produced, distributed. You get probably you almost get a show a day, I think, at how it breaks down to through this network, shows that I produce, our media partners, and our new programs, of course, the Pack Mentality Pop-Ins podcast with Pat Popolizio. That's a new show on the network, done by the folks at North Carolina State. Brian Reinhardt done a great job on that one. We've got to get some new ones out of the pipe for the Hall of Fame Legends show. I've got some of these archive tapes that I'm going to bring out. But as I said, fundraising. If you like this content, you like to see it continue with on-demand, original wrestling content you can listen to anywhere, take with you on the go, unlike anything you can hear on the internet, hit us up at our Patreon campaign at mattalkonline.com/join the team. Swag bags and all sorts of cool things, shirts, hats, that type of stuff you get by becoming a patron of this program. Also, you can just, if you want to make a one-off donation or a contribution, mattalkonline.com/contribute, you can do that. And I tell you what, I appreciate each and every one of you guys and girls out there that have they listen to the show. You send me notes, you send me feedback on what to correct on certain things. If there's a sound issue, always glad to hear it. Jason at BryantWrestling.com. The way you can email me at Jason M. Bryant on Twitter. Yes, I've got the blue check and everything. That's kind of cool. But anything you guys need are show suggestions, guests, topics. I'm all ears. You got a breaking news story or something that you want to get a little word out on. Or if there's a coach in your area or a parent in your area or an athlete in your area doing something that's just a good story, give me a shout. Jason at BryantWrestling.com. I'm less about what's going on the mat with this show in terms of, this week we've got this and that. You get that with the scoreboard. You get that with the Matt Talk Online scoreboard at almanac.mattalkonline.com or the link on the front page of Matt Talk Online in the top right. You see the college wrestling scoreboard. You get the news with my daily newsletter at mattalkonline.com/news is where you can sign up. You get a lot of different bits of news and notes and scores here on the network, but the interview, the story behind the story, the team behind the team, all those little cliches you want to throw out. That's where I want to talk about this stuff all the time. Obviously I'm not scripting this because I'm stumbling over my words right now, but that's the stories I want to hear. Jed Clark out in California sends me a note that says, hey, there's this guy who wrestled at UCLA back in the day. He's got some great stories. Yep, he's going to be on my list. There's some good stuff coming down. Mason Beckman's going to join the show next week. We're going to just wax poetic a little bit about just college wrestling. Him and Tristan Warner have a show with PA Power Wrestling. Of course, the PA Power podcast with Jeff Upson and Eric Knobsnyder does great stuff there in the Keystone State. And Tristan Warner, fellow Old Dominion alum, and Mason Beckman from Lehigh have a college podcast that is its own specific iTunes link. So if you just want to hit news about the Pennsylvania college scene, you can check that out. All those shows are linked up on the Matt Talk Online directory at mattalkonline.com/directory. Every podcast that I can find about wrestling. Now, some of those I've had to retire. Some shows have pod faded is the term they like to use over the years. And some of those, if they haven't been updated in a while, they go off the directory. They're hidden. They're not deleted. So if those shows ever come back, we can pop them right back in. But Beck Diggity will join us on an upcoming show and looking to bring Jan George from Iowa on as he's one of the co-hosts of Mat Slammers. And I actually probably need to reach out and do that and say, hey, Jan, you need to come on the show. The longest running podcast specifically noted about or specifically dedicated to the sport of wrestling. Eddie Goldman's No Holds Barred has been around for a long time, but that's a combat sports show with mentions wrestling. But Mat Slammers out of Western Iowa, Northwest Iowa, has been doing a podcast since like 2006 about high school wrestling in that area. So we're going to get Jan to talk about that. We're going to get, again, the Beck Diggity on. We're going to get a couple other podcast hosts on to talk about what they're doing. I got some ideas down the pipe. If you got ideas, again, send them to me. You've got a little bit of a, loose change you want to throw my way, again, mattalkonline.com/join the team. That's our Patreon page. That helps you say thank you to me. I say thank you to you on the show, give you a shout out, give you some stuff. That's all I got for today. And as always, I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for short time. I really just need to stick with just a short time. Thanks, guys. And girls. And dogs and cats, perhaps. The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. First time listening? Well, you can change that by going to MattTalkOnline.com/GetShortTime to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or listen on your favorite podcatcher at MattTalkOnline.com/listen.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.